17 Celsius is possible. Cooler with a brisk breeze across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. That brisk breeze lingers through Friday evening and into the weekend as well. We'll also see the wind picking up along the south coast of England. So that'll be a feature of the weather through Saturday, but look at that. Sunny skies almost across the board. By Sunday, just the threat of a few showers coming up across the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about interest rates and inflation as the Bank of England puts up borrowing costs today for the third time in as many meetings. Plus, ahead of the final Six Nations matches this coming weekend, we welcome England rugby legend Matt Dawson. He's certainly on the ball, and now he's on the money. All that after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Thank you very much, Liam. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. Here are the latest headlines from the GB newsroom. All staff at P&O Ferries are reportedly being made redundant with immediate effect. It's after all services were suspended this morning. Well, we can cross now to GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley, who's in Hull for us. A big announcement by P&O today. Anna, what more do we know about it?
Yes, we know that staff have apparently been made redundant. Here where I am in Hull, there's agency staff that are waiting in the car park to replace the staff, but the RMT, the union, have launched a sit-in. So the staff on the ferry behind me are launching a sit-in at the moment. They're refusing to move until conditions are discussed. We know that this firm operates routes from Dover to Calais, Hull to Rotterdam, Liverpool to Dublin and Kinarian to Larne. This morning passengers were told that they had to stand down, alternative routes would be made for them, and now staff are waiting to hear just what is in store for them and what their future will be. And we'll keep you updated with this story as it progresses.
OK, Anna, thank you very much. Anna Riley there, who's in Hull. We'll be back to you with an update later on, no doubt. Thank you. Other news now. The Bank of England has raised interest rates from 0.5% to 0.75%. It comes ahead of an inflation hike expected next month, estimated to reach around 8%, which the bank warns could peak even higher later in the year. It says a squeeze on household budgets exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine is likely to be larger than it had predicted last month. It was already set to be the biggest rise in 30 years. The Kremlin says it will disregard the UN's International Court of Justice demand that Russia's halts its aggression. Moscow says talks with Ukraine are continuing today via video link. It's as NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urged President Putin to pull back his forces to avoid more bloodshed.
NATO has a responsibility to prevent this conflict from escalating further. That would be even more dangerous and would cause more suffering, death and destruction.
The UK says it will deploy its medium-range anti-air missile system in Poland as NATO moves to increase security along its eastern flank. During a visit to Warsaw, the Defence Minister Ben Wallace also confirmed Britain would be deploying 100 troops to the country. It comes as Ukrainian authorities say survivors are emerging after a Russian airstrike hit a theatre sheltering hundreds of civilians. A satellite image before the strike appeared to show the word children written in Russian on the pavement. Moscow has denied its involvement in the shelling. Meanwhile, President Zelensky said peace talks are still ongoing with the Kremlin.
My priorities during the negotiations are absolutely clear. The end of the war, guarantees of security, sovereignty, restoration of territorial integrity, real guarantees for our country, real protection for our country.
The British-Iranian charity worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has finally been reunited with her family in the UK. The emotional reunion came after the 43-year-old was released from detention in Iran, where she'd been held for 6 years. Fellow British-Iranian Anousheh Ashuri was also released after being detained in Iran for nearly 5 years. The pair arrived in the early hours of this morning at RAF Bryce Norton. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng told GB News he's delighted she finally has her freedom back.
It does show that diplomacy can work. I think we worked very, very hard. The Foreign Office worked very hard. Liz Truss, I think, worked very hard. But beyond all of that, what she went through, I think, is unimaginable. I mean, to be in a prison in Iran, not knowing whether you'll ever be released, it must be an extraordinary thing that she suffered, and I'm delighted that she's back.
To the Manor-born star, Peter Bowles has died. The actor played villains in several TV series, including The Avengers, becoming a household name as the archetypal English gent. But it was with a moustache alongside Dame Penelope Keith that he became most famous. He leaves behind 3 children and a wife of over 60 years. He was 85. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, let's return to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on the money today, the Bank of England's raised its base interest rate, increasing borrowing costs for the 3rd time in as many months. Tough if you got a variable rate mortgage and other debts, but good news for savers. Plus, with the Russia-Ukraine conflict continuing and food prices shooting up, Britain needs more farmland than ever. But we're covering more and more of our precious British arable soil with solar panels. We discuss the trade-offs. And in today's in-depth money talks, it isn't with a business leader or policymaker as it usually is. As rugby fans gear up for the final weekend of the Six Nations, we've invited former England rugby captain Matt Dawson onto the show. And if rugby isn't your thing, you may recognise him from his days dancing across your TV screen on Strictly or cooking up a storm on MasterChef. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your opinions, questions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. I'll read out some of your messages later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News on TV and DAB+, digital radio and online. I'm Liam Halligan. You're On the Money. I'm old enough to remember what very high inflation was like, said Jerome Powell yesterday. He chairs the mighty Federal Reserve, the US central bank. We're strongly committed, as a committee, said Powell, to not allowing this higher inflation to become entrenched. In America, inflation is now at 7.9%, with prices rising at their fastest rate since the early 1980s. That's why the Fed increased rates yesterday in a bid to convince firms, financial markets and everyone else that the US authorities are determined to bear down on and contain inflation, even if that means slowing the economy down. Our own Bank of England today followed similar logic, raising its base interest rate by 0.25% to 0.75%. Now that's still very low historically, but at a time when the economy is already slowing and any rise in borrowing costs does impose pain. But the bank's acting because UK inflation, as in the US, is also high and rising. Headline inflation here, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, puts price rises at 5.5% during the year to January, well above the bank's 2% target. But broader inflation measures like the Retail Price Index, or RPIX, a measure the banks used to target, they're much higher, already above 7 or even 8%. The impact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict on energy and food prices means UK inflation, already at a 30-year high, is set to go up now even more. But making it more expensive to borrow in Britain won't increase Russian energy exports, easing spiralling oil and gas prices. High UK interest rates won't help a war-torn Ukraine to grow more crops to sell on global markets, keeping food prices low. So how will higher rates help the Bank of England fight inflation? Well, because if it's demonstrating that it understands if it kept rates low, stimulating borrowing and spending, that itself fuels price rises. So by raising rates, the bank is taking away part of that economic stimulus while making sure we earn a bit more on our savings, which many pensioners will welcome. This UK rate rise, the third in successive meetings, shows the bank is determined now to tackle inflation. But here's our on-the-money question today. How high will UK interest rates go? Here at On the Money, as ever, grown-up conversations with people who really know their stuff. So I'm delighted to be joined by a host of guests today, including senior investment analyst at Hargreaves Lansdown, that's Susan Streeter. We've got Nikolai Hubble, who's the editor of Fortune and Freedom. Plus, we've got the chief economic strategist at Net Wealth, Gerard Lyons, former economic advisor to Boris Johnson. And join me in the studio, our regular panellist, Miss MoneyMagpie.com herself, Jasmine Birtles. Gerard Lyons, let's start with you. Happy St. Patrick's Day, firstly, to you, Gerard. This is a big moment in British monetary policy. We've seen 3 successive rate rises now from December and then again in February and now in March. We are increasing interest rates gradually. How high could they go?
Well, happy St. Patrick's Day to you as well, Liam, and it's great to be on the show again. How high could rates go? Well, the direction of rates is clearly up, but the war has changed both the likely speed and scale of tightening. So the level at which rates will peak, I think, is some way off. And I think rates should be heading towards 4%, in my personal opinion. But clearly, given the economic environment, we're not going to get there very rapidly. The interesting thing today, though, let's put it back to today. The key thing today was that the Bank of England not only raised rates, but significantly, they said that inflation no longer will definitely peak in the second quarter. Previously, they'd always been convinced that inflation would peak in the second quarter, maybe stay elevated, but then come down. Now they're saying rates could actually climb even higher. That's a concern. The other significant thing today was that, unlike the Fed, and you alluded to the Fed last night gave a clear direction to the market. They were quite adamant that they were going to cap inflationary pressures and keep inflation in check. That's important for managing inflation expectations. In contrast today, the Bank of England basically said it's in two minds. It's not quite sure. And that's partly because of the stagflation emanating from the war. The war will add to inflation near term, but will also hit growth as prices go higher. But the challenge is that the bank is not giving direction to the market, and that's a concern. There are other issues, but maybe we can come back to them. But definitely rates will have to go higher, but it's by no means clear cut that they will go higher immediately or in a significant way from now. So the direction is up, but the speed and scale of tightening is still open for debate.
Susanna Streeter, you're with the financial services company Hargreaves Lansdown. You help people manage their money. Gerard Lyons, he's a pretty well-connected bloke. A lot of people think that he should have been the Bank of England governor at one stage. Do you think he's right that rates are going all the way up to 4%? And if he is right, what does that mean for people watching and listening to this show?
Well, it's interesting to get that forecast because actually the Office for Budget Responsibility has said that if we don't get inflation under control, you could see rates rise up to 3.5%, not quite the 4% mooted there. But certainly up until I think that we saw these commodity prices really become so chaotic after the invasion of Ukraine, there wasn't that much expectation that interest rates would go above 1.25% this year. But certainly now, given this forecast and the fact that inflation is set to reach and go above potentially 8% in the coming months and even go further later this year, it does look increasingly likely that interest rates will be marching above 1.25%. But still, as you pointed out, Liam, a little bit earlier, on a historic basis, these are still low rates, but it's going to come as a shock because we've got used to the era of cheap and easy money. And that's really what's been fueling this bounce back, actually, from the pandemic. When you look at retail sales, people are spending, partly actually because putting away their money into those savings accounts just hasn't been worth it. Such low rates hanging around. And although you mentioned as well that actually it's good news for savers, well, it's not good news yet. Those rates haven't gone up on those, particularly those instant access savings accounts. Most of them still languishing around 0.01%, so low. We're going to have to see rates rise quite substantially before really those savings rates rise. But certainly it isn't good news if you have a mortgage, particularly if you're on a standard variable rate. So really the time is to try and fix if you can.
Nikolai Hubble, I've read your work over many years. You work for Fortune and Freedom now. You have for a long time been warning about the dangers of easy money, the dangers of so-called quantitative easing, central banks expanding their balance sheets. How high do you think interest rates could go here in the UK? They're still historically very, very low, as Susanna Streeter just pointed out.
Yeah, if we look throughout history, what we see is a downtrend in interest rates since the 80s. And each time interest rates were hiked, there was some sort of financial crisis. So that was the cycle, the repetition. Overall, falling interest rates over a long period of time. But each time we began an upcycle, there was a crisis. Now, that suggests that this time around, they won't be able to raise interest rates anywhere near the levels that we've been talking about because there'll be some sort of financial crisis somewhere, given the amount of debt that's increased in the global financial system, especially within governments now, but also within the banking system, mortgages. That interest rate level that we're thinking about to rein in inflation would trigger a debt crisis first. On the other hand, the gap between inflation and interest rates is now so big that there's a chance that inflation could get completely out of control. And it won't really matter what central banks do. I think on social media, somebody just commented on your tweet, Liam, saying that I think it was interest rates at 1/10 of inflation is a huge strategic mistake. And it suggests that things could, with inflation, could get completely out of control.
And that means, of course, doesn't it, Jasmine, that as we say in real terms, we often explain this on The Money, after inflation, interest rates are massively negative because you've got an interest rate of 0.75% and an inflation rate which could easily be officially 7.5% soon.
Yes.
That distorts things. Who's got an incentive to save?
Well, exactly, yes. As Susanna said, there's really not much point in saving. I mean, that is the point, of course, of having low interest rates. It encourages people to borrow, encourages people and businesses to spend. But, you can only do that for so long. And with inflation at an astounding rate, I mean, 5.5%, even 7 or 8%, I think that's all a work of fiction. I think we're well in, in real terms.
Into double digits.
We are into double digits.
In terms of people's lived experience, if you like. When you look at fuel bills, if you look at petrol prices, diesel prices, food prices.
Yes.
Even before the Russia-Ukraine crisis, they're already very high.
Exactly. And I think, if it were a decent sort of time, if we were not actually in stagflation, because we really are, stagnant economy, rampant inflation, if we didn't have the stagnant economy element, really and truly, I think we should have interest rates of around 7 or 8% right now, honestly. I mean, it'd be great to get them up to 3.5%, 4%, but with a stagnant economy, you just can't. And that's why interest rates, I think, would be kept
All
lower.
this, of course, is a huge hanger from the 2008 financial crisis.
Yes.
That's when interest rates went down from 6, 5, 4% all the way down, basically, to zero, and we've never really recovered that. We're going to carry on this discussion after the show with Jasmine Birtles, with the rest of our expert panel. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We will keep talking about interest rates, inflation, what it means for you, how high could interest rates go. We'll be talking about complex issues. We'll be explaining the details as we go to make sure everyone can understand what we're saying. That's what we do here on the Money. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast. We'll read out some of those shortly. Stay with us.
Hello again. Spring sunshine to come for all of us over the next few days. Today, not everywhere seeing sunny skies, but we do have plenty of it, certainly across the south. And in that sunshine, it feels quite mild. Further north, we do have some showers around, low pressure and some weather fronts. But in the south, this high pressure is building in, bringing, as I say, a sunny day, certainly across much of southern England and eastern England too. Further north, we're having more clouds and some showers over northern England, North Wales, maybe 1 or 2 drifting into southeast Wales and the Midlands. Certainly plenty of showers coming into Scotland, Northern Ireland, mostly of rain, but some snow over the hills across the Highlands. Not too many showers this afternoon for Northern Ireland. Mostly dry and bright here. And temperatures here in Belfast, Glasgow, up to 10 or 11. But further south, 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius in that sunshine. Through the evening and overnight, we'll see those showers fading over northern England. We'll keep some going over the extreme northwest of Scotland, but otherwise a dry night and a clear night largely. But certainly across the Midlands, parts of Wales, southern England, some mist and fog patches are likely to form. Further north, it's likely to stay clear, and we are going to see a frost. A cold start wherever you are then to Friday, and there will be some perhaps quite dense patches of fog through the morning rush hour. Could take a couple of hours before that clears away completely, but it should eventually go. Certainly by late morning, it's looking largely dry and sunny. Sunshine fairly hazy at times over northern Scotland, but for most places, it's a cracking day if you like spring sunshine. Temperatures getting widely into the teens, 16, 17 Celsius is possible. Cooler with a brisk breeze across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. That brisk breeze lingers through Friday evening and into the weekend as well. We'll also see the wind picking up along the south coast of England. So that'll be a feature of the weather through Saturday, but look at that. Sunny skies almost across the board. By Sunday, just the threat of a few showers coming up across the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 1:23. We're carrying on this discussion of the Bank of England's decision to increase interest rates from 0.5 to 0.75% this lunchtime. So your variable rate mortgages are going to go up and other non-fixed rate debt, but good news for savers. So we've had 3 interest rate rises now in as many meetings since December, but they're still historically low. We're discussing this with my panel of experts. Gerard Lyons, let's go back to you. You are the former chief economic advisor to Boris Johnson when he was mayor of London. We're in a situation, as Nikolai Hubble pointed out, where inflation is heading for 7.5% and interest rates are 0.75%. Inflation is 10 times higher soon, it will be, than interest rates. That's not sustainable, is it? Something has to give. The economy seems kind of topsy-turvy at the moment.
Well, I think that's right. But I think it's important for your viewers to recognise that we've been talking about where rates should be. And the question is where rates maybe will go to. And there's a difference between where they should be and where they might actually move to over the next year. We shouldn't be in this position. I think we all accept that. Monetary policy last year was far too lax. Bank of England should have been tightening then. Also, over the last decade, even though inflation has been low, we've seen rampant asset price inflation in terms of financial markets and in house prices. And that's a reflection of monetary policy being too loose for too long. Now, the challenge is this, that unlike America, where fiscal policy is being relaxed, here in the UK, we're about to see fiscal policy being tightened with tax increases. So the combination of the cost of living squeeze, higher taxes, and also this monetary tightening will inevitably slow the economy. That means that the Bank of England today was sort of in two minds. It wasn't quite sure whether it should be hiking and giving the message it will continue to hike because it's so far behind the curve on inflation, or whether, as it turned out, saying we're in two minds, partly because we know the economy will take a slowdown. But the clear message from what we're all saying today is that there's no easy way out of this. The economy will have to slow in some way, shape or form. And that therefore implies that we need to see gradual movement in terms of the Bank of England. It can't be aggressive in putting its foot down on the brake too hard. But the challenge is that monetary policy is in the wrong position. We shouldn't be where we are now, but to get to where we should be will clearly impact the economy. But the economy is also going to be hit hard by energy price increases and also by tax increases. What we're probably going to see, Liam, just to conclude, is over the last decade, we've seen unconventional monetary policy. Now I think we might have to move to unconventional fiscal policy. And the problem then becomes a political one. And the Bank of England will, in that environment, still have to be tightening, but the speed of tightening will be heavily influenced by all the other factors, some of which are outside its control. But monetary policy is definitely too loose at the moment. But to get to where it needs to be is not going to be easy, and it unfortunately will be painful.
To Nikolai Hubble. Nikolai, you often write about history. You're joining us from Japan, the land of where quantitative easing, massive central bank balance sheet expansion originated, at least in modern times. Do you see trouble on the horizon as we try and unwind ourselves from this really odd monetary situation?
Yeah, behind the curve is the key phrase here, as was just mentioned. I think the idea that central bankers are so far behind the curve that either they're going to have to crash the economy deliberately by raising interest rates in order to rein in inflation, or they're going to have to let inflation just run out of control and sort of give up on reining it in anytime soon. They face that choice, and I think that's what readers need to take away: is this choice, this really difficult, impossible choice between the two. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be really difficult to predict which way it's going to go. But both extremes are the two likely outcomes.
Streeter, we're slightly pressed for time, but we don't want to be alarmist here on the money. We want to have, realistic discussions with people who know what they're talking about. But in this kind of situation where people are concerned about some kind of serious downward adjustment, what can you tell people who just want to park some money and save for a rainy day?
Well, obviously, there's still a risk of parking that money in an instant access savings account paying 0.01%. So it's still worth looking over the longer term, looking at your longer term horizons, because on a historic basis, you invest in the financial markets can offer a much greater return than simply keeping it in a savings account. So you do still have to look at the longer term. Certainly, we're going to be in for a bit of a roller coaster ride over the next few months or perhaps the next year. But many people have still built up those lockdown savings. They are eating into it. But I think what's going to be crucial is what Rishi Sunak announces next week in the spring statement. There really is a pressure, I think, for some help for those low-income families in particular who will be really struggling with those energy bills. So I think a lot of focus is going to be on that. And I do think the government will pull something out of the bag.
Jasmine, what is quite reassuring, I think, amidst real concerns expressed among our panellists, the Bank of England has raised interest rates, the Fed has raised interest rates. Financial markets haven't collapsed.
No.
I mean, a lot of people said as soon as they start moving on interest rates, moving us into the real world or closer to the real world, away from endless, easy money and ultra-low rates, financial markets would instantly collapse. And yet they've held relatively firm. It's got to be at least some grounds for optimism.
Absolutely, yes. I think it is a help. The other thing is, of course, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And when you move interest rates, it doesn't have an effect immediately. It has an effect a few months ahead. And all sorts of things could happen. The Ukraine-Russia crisis could sort itself out. We're certainly hearing about...
Oil prices come down, you get a rush of optimism.
Yes. So, potentially by the end of the year, I mean, I know it sounds like, miles away now, but things could ease off.
Very, very interesting. Thank you to all my panel. Jasmine Birtles, MissMoneyMagpie.com, Susanna Streeter of Hargreaves Lansdown, Nikolai Hubble of Fortune and Freedom. Great to have you on our show, Nikolai. Another time again, I hope. And, of course, my old mate on St Patrick's Day, Gerard Lyons of Netwealth. Thanks to all my panel. Now, just briefly, P&O, the British ferry passenger line that dates back to the 19th century, is reportedly making serious redundancies among its 22,000 staff. The ferry company, now owned by DP World of Dubai, has suspended services from its 4 routes, including Dover to Calais and Liverpool to Dublin. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has been in what he calls urgent discussions with P&O. Well, we're joined now by Daniel Proctor, who's National Secretary of the RMT Union, which represents many P&O workers. Great to have you on the show. You must be quite concerned, Darren, about this news. What do we actually know?
OK, so what we actually know is that around 6:30 this morning, crew on board the vessels were given a notice that the vessels would be tying up alongside, then that they would be getting off and that there would be an announcement later on in the day. Around about 9 to 10 a.m. this morning, there was coaches pulling up with replacement crews on board in Dover, in Hull and in Larne and Cairn Ryan. Then the announcement was made at 11:10. And the company announced that as of today, without any consultation with anybody, the company was making redundant everyone from the captain right the way down to the KP, which equates to roughly around 850 seafarers.
From the captain to the kitchen porters, wow. So all seafaring staff, that's your information, are going to be made redundant?
Yeah, all seafaring staff are going to be made redundant as of today. No consultation. No heads up, no dialogue at all with the trade unions. They're just going to a new model of flexible, low-cost labour, we believe, and they're very aggressive in what they've been doing. The security staff, they've recruited an outside agency that has to have handcuff training. So they're very aggressive in what they've done today.
And how might RMT respond? I'm sure DP World, who own P&O these days, DP World of Dubai, have done their homework. But are you even if this is legal, I'm sure your union thinks it isn't moral.
Well, we don't think it's legal. We think it's morally incorrect what they've done. You know, in the UK, we maritime nation, seafaring skills, and they're just looking to rip up all the seafaring skills that they've got that have worked right the way through the pandemic and the many years before that have delivered. So we're seeking political intervention, we're seeking public support, and, we're going to do everything possible to make sure that we campaign to retain those jobs on board those vessels, and we're not going to allow an employer to come in and make these kinds of moves, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Well, Darren, good to talk to you, albeit under very difficult circumstances for you and your members. Thanks for appearing on The Money here on GB News. Darren Proctor there, the National Secretary of the RMT Union. Worrying times for them. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's In-Depth Money Talks interview is with Matt Dawson, none other, the TV personality and former rugby union legend, World Cup winner in 2003, of course. But first, the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 1:33. Here are the latest headlines from the GB newsroom. P&O Ferries have confirmed 800 staff will be made redundant in a bid to save the company, which lost around £100 million last year. The company said services are unable to run in the coming few days and that in its current state, it's not a viable business. The Bank of England has raised interest rates from 0.5% to 0.75%. It comes ahead of an inflation hike expected next month, estimated to reach around 8%, which the bank warns could peak even higher later in the year. The UK says it will deploy its medium-range anti-air missile system to Poland as NATO moves to increase security along its eastern flank. During a visit to Warsaw, the Defence Minister Ben Wallace also confirmed Britain will be deploying 100 troops to the country. It comes as Ukrainian authorities say survivors are emerging after a Russian airstrike hit a theatre sheltering hundreds of civilians. The Kremlin says it will disregard the UN's International Court of Justice demand that Russia halt its aggression. Moscow says talks with Ukraine are continuing today via video link. It says NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urged President Putin to pull back his forces to avoid more bloodshed. The BBC says it's reached a substantial settlement with the private secretary of Diana, Princess of Wales. The broadcaster says it acknowledges serious harm was caused to Commander Patrick Jeffson as a result of the Martin Bashir Panorama interview in 1995. It says it apologises unreservedly to the commander and has paid a substantial sum in damages. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Back to On The Money in just a moment, so don't go anywhere.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. It's 1:37. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Now, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, putting two of Europe's biggest crop exporters out of action, there are growing concerns about possible food shortages here in Britain. So why are we covering hectares of British farmland in solar panels then? With less energy dependence on Russia, alternative sources are a must. And as we've often discussed on The Money, the government could soon be making announcements about the expansion of nuclear energy, plus more oil and gas extraction from the North Sea, and perhaps even the use of shale gas mined by fracking. Well, joining me to talk about our energy options and particularly the use of solar power is public policy commentator Jason Reed. Jason, welcome on to the show.
Thank you.
You've really got a beef with the amount of farmland that we're covering with solar panels, haven't you?
I have. Food insecurity in this country is something we don't talk about enough. Millions and millions of people live in households which struggle to put food on the table, and that's only going to get worse this year as the cost of living crisis really takes hold. And so against that backdrop, I think it's bonkers that we're giving up so much of our farmland voluntarily to renewable energy companies to cover in solar panels when the technology just isn't there yet for us to switch as a nation to renewable sources of energy.
Do we know the extent to which farmland's covered now by solar panels? I live in the east of England, heartland farming country of the UK. I do see quite a lot of solar panels just from when I'm driving along country roads and along the motorway.
We've seen a huge uptick in the last couple of years in the number of applications to local authorities for these kinds of projects. We've seen it went up by a third in 2021, and that trend is continuing into this year as well. It's knocking on the door of 1,000 separate solar farm projects that are in the works. And some areas, particularly areas with high proportions of farmland, are the hardest hit. Hampshire, for example, has been the subject of 28 different applications, most of which seem likely to go through. There's one that's going to cover 140 football pitches worth of land in Bramley and Silchester, which would make it the largest solar farm in England on agricultural land. All this farmland in other counties as well, of course, that we're just giving up in order to make Britain into effectively one giant solar panel.
Now, solar panels, photovoltaic cells, they are getting more sophisticated. Solar, we joke about the British weather, don't we? But solar power in the UK is not a joke, is it? Obviously, we're really good at wind power, who knew? But solar power is not a joke. You must acknowledge that. There is a role, don't you think, for some solar power and renewables more generally here in Britain?
Absolutely. There's a really important role for renewable energy of various kinds to play in where we get our energy from. But I think this rush to net zero as quickly as possible is really misguided. It would be really convenient in environmental terms if we could turn off the tap for all the fossil fuels tomorrow, but we can't do that for a number of reasons, not least because the technology just isn't there to accumulate and store energy through, for example, solar power that we would need to do in a cost-effective way to keep energy bills down. The government has all its targets for net zero and switching to renewable energy, which many have said are over-optimistic anyway. But even assuming we hit those targets, that's still many years in the immediate future where we will still need to rely on fossil fuels. And so I think it's a wild goose chase to pretend that we can just switch, turn all our farmland into solar panels and make all our energy needs go away. And then, of course, there's the immense collateral damage that has on the farming sector and our food security as well.
So you've been writing and researching in this area for some time, Jason. One reason we invited you on the show, I should tell you, is because we have talked to lots of farmers here on The Money. In fact, we've got a farming special tomorrow lunchtime about food security, about the fact that lots of farmers now, even if we could switch to domestic food production, which many people think we should, given our huge reliance that we now realise on Russia, Ukraine and food imports generally, because gas prices are high, because fuel prices are high, because fertiliser prices are so high, even if we were focused on domestic food production, it would still be really expensive by the time it gets in the shops.
this is a good point, and we definitely do need to be expanding the number of countries around the world that we're trading with when it comes to food and fertilizer and so on as well. But this latest crisis just goes to show that we do need the British farming sector as a crutch to lean on in times of crisis. You mentioned rightly, of course, Ukraine and Russia being two of the biggest crop exporters in the world. And the crops that we're buying from them are things like wheat and barley and corn. Exactly.
Absolute feedstock.
Exactly. And they're things that we don't need tropical climates to grow. We can and do grow those in this country as well. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to be maximising our ability to grow it in this country as well, so that when there are crises elsewhere in the world, we don't have people unable to put food on the table.
Well, it's an interesting debate, Jason, and we're grateful to you for your contribution here on today's show. Jason Reed, their policy commentator, talking about our energy options. Now, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anusha Ashuri have been reunited finally with their families in the UK after years of detention in Iran. The British Iranian nationals were met by their families at RAF Brize Norton in Oxfordshire early this morning. Nazanin was first arrested by Iranian authorities in 2016. So why has it taken so long for her to be released? Well, our London reporter Alice Porter reports from outside the Iranian embassy. Alice, good to have you on the money as ever.
The story behind Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's imprisonment goes back more than 40 years. It goes back to a deal between Iran and the UK when Iran ordered tanks from the UK, but the majority of them were never received. So there was a £400 million debt between the two countries that Iran wanted the UK to pay. And that's been very much the backdrop to this effective sort of hostage situation with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe at the centre of it. Now, both the Iranian government and the British government have been at pains to say that the debt issue between the two countries is entirely separate, but it's difficult to argue that they are entirely separate, given the fact that Nazanin has only returned back to the UK after that debt was finally paid by the British government after more than 40 years. So that's sort of one backdrop to this entire story. But of course, there are other geopolitics at play. We've had Boris Johnson in the Middle East this week trying to get a new oil deal with Saudi Arabia. And then on top of that, we've got the UK wanting to become less reliant on Russian oil, Russian energy because of the situation in Ukraine. And if you look to Iran at the moment, their economy is suffering dreadfully. So it could be argued that it would be in multiple countries' interests if sanctions on Iran were lifted partially in order for oil to be bought by the UK in order to bring down global oil prices.
Alice Porter there reporting from outside the Iranian embassy in London. Well, it's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I'm joined by none other than rugby union legend Matt Dawson, once England's most capped scrum half. Matt played for Northampton Saints, moving on to London Wasps, and he famously played in England's 2003 Rugby World Cup winning side. Since retiring from the great game, Matt's been the team captain on A Question of Sport, and he's more recently taken part in Strictly Come Dancing ahead of the final weekend of the Six Nations as England face France. Its former England rugby captain, Matt Dawson, my latest guest on Money Talks. Matt Dawson, thanks a lot for joining me here on The Money. I should say at the outset, my son's a huge Northampton Saints fan, and we've often admired your dummy of the century against the Springboks. Was it back in 1997?
Just that short 25 years ago, Liam. Yeah, indeed. I will say hello to your boy.
Oh, well, you took out 4 huge Springboks with one by pretending to throw the ball over your head, but then not throwing it over your head. But are you as good at tackling money issues as you are at tackling South African and Australian forwards?
Well, I'd like to think that I am a little bit more astute with my cash than maybe I was when I was a little bit younger. I suppose, from being a little whippersnapper and teaching, selling, advertising, security guards, I didn't have a huge amount of money in those days. So making sure I was saving and doing all the right things was high on the priority list. I got a little bit loose, classic, went for the property abroad and that fell through. things that unfortunately professional sports people do. So I wouldn't say I've been an absolute shining light.
A lot of younger people won't realise that when you started out in rugby union, it was still an amateur game. So you were actually doing it for love rather than for money, and your driving ambition to put yourself forward and make your mark in international rugby, which you did so successfully in the end. And I know you want to talk today, don't you, about some research that Canada Life has been doing on people's aspirations, the fact that people, so many young people in particular, feel that financial insecurity holds back their ability to be ambitious, to be entrepreneurial. It didn't hold you back, did it? But I'm sure you understand why it might.
Well, I mean, I suppose if I take myself back to when I was 18, 19 years old, having financial stability was, of course, a priority. Every single penny was counted. I was moving away from home. I needed to understand what my food bill was, my electricity bill, my socializing, how much I was going to spend with that, my travel, etc. And yeah, I mean, they were incredibly tough times. Now, fortunate for me, I've gone through a professional rugby career and things were okay, but then you retire and get divorced. You have kids. There's lots of sort of bumps along the way that all of a sudden then take you back to, right, I need to focus on the goals that are going to take me forward for me to enjoy the rest of my life. And a lot of the focus, Liam, particularly over the last couple of years, has been around our general health and well-being. And quite rightly, there's a focus on mental health, on physical health, on nutrition, diet, etc. But we cannot underestimate how important understanding our financial health and what we need to understand to sort of complete that Venn diagram of three. So yeah, you mentioned that research that Canada Life are doing. It's been very apparent that people do want to have aspirations and goals and dreams financially, but unless they plan appropriately, unless they dedicate themselves sort of day in, day out, that's where I come from. It's you're obviously into rugby yourself, into sport. You don't just get to win the trophies. You've got to train every day. You've got to go to the gym. You've got to eat the right things. You've got to prepare right. You've got to rehab. You've got to learn. And I don't think financial health is any different. You've got to dedicate yourself to do it. Little and often, those incremental gains will get you to where you want to be.
I think that's very well put, Matt Dawson. I think there's huge links between financial insecurity and general mental instability and a lack of mental health and well-being. I'd say I'm a little bit older than you, I think, but I think we're both of a generation where even if you weren't earning that much money, I started out in journalism. It's a bit like rugby. It looks very glamorous from the outside, but you don't make much cash, even if you're pretty good at it and operating at a high level. But I could buy a house in my 20s, even on a young reporter's salary. The idea that kids can buy a house in their 20s now, it's just no way. No way. And I don't think mainstream politicians and even most of the media really get that. So I think this Canada Life research, which focuses on the importance of financial stability in terms of well-being, is actually really important.
Yeah, because first and foremost, you've got to understand what your goals are, Liam. And yeah, our goals from when we were in that period of time of thinking, oh, do you know what? It's about time I bought myself a house. The reality right now is that that is not anywhere near as simple as a task. So, what are the financial goals that people are striving towards? Is it to create a deposit for a mortgage? Is it for a holiday? Is it for survival? Do they see where their job's going to be in 2 years' time? Are they going to move? Are they going to travel? But the theory behind it is still very much the same for me. It does. You can sort of compare it to your health and nutrition. If you wanted to lose weight, you don't just wake up in the morning and say, right, I'm going to drop a kilo. You've got to go through the processes of making sure that you've got the right food in the fridge and that you're eating at the right times and you're doing some exercise and you're hydrating well, and salt, sugars, fats. There's loads of key components towards it. And the financial health side of things, you need to plan. And it is tough. It is going to be, and it was tough for me then, and it's tough for me now to try and live the life that I've thought that I was going to be living for the rest of my life. Has taken a turn because of other circumstances, and lots of people are in those circumstances. But I am going to have to do things in a different way, or rather have been doing things in a different way to get myself back on track with it. And I've enjoyed doing it. I like the discipline. I might have a little bit of more self-belief and confidence than others, but I like the discipline behind that, because if I get to my goals, then I feel the sense of achievement, and I'll be celebrating those goals as well.
Dawson, you are a hugely respected figure, not just on the rugby pitch. You were fantastic on Question of Sport with Tuffers. I think you've got a great future ahead of you doing whatever you want to do, and I wish you all the best. And I just want to ask you, can the English beat the French? Can the Irish beat the Scottish and get a St Patrick's weekend championship?
I think Ireland will, and quite rightly, fancy their chances against Scotland. They are a very, very good side. England, I would love to think that those England boys have travelled to Paris thinking there is one party to spoil. Let's have it.
As my Irish cousin says, we'll be waving the St George's flag at least for once. Matt Dawson, rugby legend. Great to have you here on my show. An honour and a privilege. Many similar conversations with major figures in the worlds of business and finance, and indeed sport, plus dozens of other extended Money Talks interviews now on my Money Talks podcast on the GB News YouTube channel or via the GB News app. Just time for some emails that you've been sending in. Bob says, how does putting up interest rates help with inflation? If my mortgage goes up in line with interest rates and they hit 4%, surely that only adds to inflation. It's because it takes demand out of the economy. It's painful, but that lower demand means lower price rises. Mark says interest rate rise at this time. It's just misery for so many working people in the UK. When is the government going to realise they need to help? The economy is going to slow down right now. Robert says, so how does putting up interest rates bring down inflation if businesses have mortgages, bank loans and overdrafts? This adds to inflation. Surely we will carry on talking about interest rates and inflation. It's going to be a major trend over the next few weeks, months and years. Keep those emails coming. Tell me what you want to be discussed here on the show. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a 2-hour On The Money special. The first half, 1 to 2, is about farming. The second half is a curtain raiser, as we say, a preview of Rishi Sunak's spring statement. Lucky you, lucky me. We will be looking ahead to that statement on Wednesday, all important, helping you to assess the cost of living crisis and to beat the squeeze. This is GB News on TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. Thanks for joining me today. I am Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hello again. Spring sunshine to come for all of us over the next few days. Today, not everywhere seeing sunny skies, but we do have plenty of it, certainly across the south. And in that sunshine, it feels quite mild. Further north, we do have some showers around, low pressure and some weather fronts. But in the south, this high pressure is building in, bringing, as I say, a sunny day, certainly across much of southern England and eastern England too. Further north, we're having more clouds and some showers over northern England, North Wales, maybe 1 or 2 drifting into southeast Wales and the Midlands. Certainly plenty of showers coming into Scotland, Northern Ireland, mostly of rain, but some snow over the hills across the Highlands. Not too many showers this afternoon for Northern Ireland. Mostly dry and bright here. And temperatures here in Belfast, Glasgow, up to 10 or 11. But further south, 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius in that sunshine. Through the evening and overnight, we'll see those showers fading over northern England. We'll keep some going over the extreme northwest of Scotland, but otherwise a dry night and a clear night largely. But certainly across the Midlands, parts of Wales, southern England, some mist and fog patches are likely to form. Further north, it's likely to stay clear, and we are going to see a frost. A cold start wherever you are then to Friday, and there will be some perhaps quite dense patches of fog through the morning rush hour. Could take a couple of hours before that clears